Good morning. Today we're going to talk about abdominal assessments and why you would do an abdominal assessment and how it relates possibly to your sport. So if you have a weak abdominal wall, primarily lower abdominal wall would be causing a lot of problems, but in some cases where we need to brace our trunk, like in Kumgan, where we're rotating across the top of the form, being able to brace your upper body is critical, and if the abdominal wall is weak or it's out of balance with the rest of the core, it will not, well, it won't help you. So let's just do one. So we're here, so as he turns, yep, and he starts to wiggle around here, you get this kind of problem. A lot of people say, oh, it's your legs, it's your feet, it's all of those things, but a great deal of the stability will come out of the lower abdominal wall, where you're able to stabilize and assist with the other muscles that are stabilizing your hip line. Let me see, let's get another one where we actually punch forward. Here is possibly a lower abdominal weakness. It's the reason he's leaning forward or he's flexing his trunk forward is because his hip flexors are too tight and his abdominal wall is not strong enough to counter the tension on his hip flexor. We might even stretch his hip flexor and he still has this tendency. It's because there's a great deal of imbalance. Okay, so let's get on. So Steve, will you come on in and help us here? My partner, Steve Muckenstable, he's a Czech practitioner, and he does many of these assessments on our athletes. So put your feet in his hands. Like a front kick, he puts the balls of his feet. Jim's going to do three different, he's going to check it in three different ways. Out in front, hands across the body, and then one by his head. And this will be graded up in difficulty, so we can actually find out exactly where his weakness is, and we can give it a grade. Okay. So first one will be hands out in front, and what he merely does is he sits up. And we're watching for the feet coming up off. See, it's getting light, but it didn't happen. Okay, put your hands across your chest. Now he sits up again. Yeah, they're about the same. They're a little bit lighter. Okay, now puts his hands by his head, and he sits up, and they come off his hands. So the first one, if he fails at the first one, that would be positive. That would be poor. If he fails at the second one, it'd be his abdominal strength would be fair. If he fails here, it's reasonably good, but we still we're gonna work a little bit further and see if we can test it a little bit further. That would be upper end, more of the upper end, and that would be relative to crunches and that sort of half of a movement. Okay, so Steve's going to check his lower abdominal wall, and the way we do this, caveat here, is that if you have an athlete that has a really sore back, this is not an assessment you want to do. Steve puts his hands under his back, right below the umbilicus. It's L3, which is the apex of the lumbar curve, and then has him tighten up his core against the hand, and then releases the foot or the feet so that they slowly go to the floor. All right. Now that's where he caught him. That's where he failed. Okay. Three sections here. We can actually get you see us on the fly, and I can give you the degrees of failure. But if it fails high, that means it would be poor. If it fails about medium, that would be fair. If it doesn't fail until it gets to the ground, that would be more on the good side. Okay. All right. Now those people who have a lower back problem would use instead of doing this test, we do a coordination test where he bends his knees like this, maintaining this angle of knee flexion, and he would do the same thing. He would go down and touch the floor, and then he'd come back up. Now, if it fails, or you feel the change in his low back on the way down, that would be poor. If it changes at the floor, that would be fair, and then if it changes when he's coming up, that would be good. Now, that would relate to, how much work we want to do with his lower abdominal wall. It has a huge amount to do with your pelvic tilt. Your low back is sore primarily because you're probably tilted too far anteriorly. Women primarily would have more pelvic tilt. It could also mean that maybe it's tilted posteriorly and the back is really flat, and you might have to do some work in the opposite direction in order to create some tilt. But this would give you an assessment on the abdominal wall so that you could start looking at this. So again, if your athlete's flexing too far forward when he's punching or when he's standing in some sort of front stance, if he's having trouble standing on one leg and he's unable to keep the center of his body in a tight position, then first thing you want to do is look at this assessment and see if there's something we need to do. We'll get you exercises and stretching and so forth at either another video, or you can catch us on the fly, see Steven or Jim, and because we're at most of the major tournaments, and we can help you then. All right, thank you.